Hello, welcome to Meet the Thriller Author, a podcast that features interviews with authors of mysteries, thrillers, and suspense novels. My name is Alan Peterson, and I am your host. I am also an author of thrillers, and that is why when I decided to start a podcast where I would be interviewing fellow authors, I decided to focus on the genre that I write in and that I love, which is the thriller genre. And for simplicity's sake, by thrillers here, I'm talking about books that you would find in Amazon's mystery, thriller, and suspense category, as well as its subcategories of crime fiction, such as police procedurals, psychological thrillers, espionage, those type of novels. These are the authors that you'll be meeting during this podcast. Okay, so with that out of the way, stay tuned for the latest episode of Meet the Thriller Author. Hey everybody, welcome to Meet the Thriller Author, and in this episode, interviewing Renée Pawlish is an award-winning author of the best-selling Reed Ferguson mystery series, and she writes in other genres as well, and so we're going to be talking to her about her books and how things are going for her. Renée, are you there?
I am. Hello.
Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, did I pronounce your name correctly, or did I butcher it?
No, just polish, like shoe polish.
Okay, good. For our listeners who haven't read your books before, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself and about your books?
Sure. You said I write the Reed Ferguson mystery series. That's my main series. There was a character in one of the books' backstory named Dewey Webb, and part of backstory took place in the 1950s, so I've started a new series with Dewey Webb. The first one is Web of Deceit, and it's out, and then there's a second one at the editor, and then I've got a kind of a middle grade YA action adventure series for kids, and then a couple of other stories. Nephilim is a kind of a supernatural mystery slash thriller slash horror story, or I guess it could even be considered post-apocalyptic. I guess there's so many different genres right now, so I've got quite a bit of stuff out there right now.
And so your Reed Fergusons, are those like the mysteries, like detective stories?
Yeah. Reed Ferguson is a private investigator that started out when I wrote it. There were no novels, because I wrote it back in like 2001, and at that time I could not find a private eye novel where you were actually witnessing the private eye's first case, and typically it's the first book, right? But he's a seasoned detective, and so I thought, well, that'll be a different twist to make it his very first case. And then I was kind of playing around with, okay, what got him into this whole thing, and I made him kind of a trust fund baby who has always loved film noir and detective fiction, and so he decides to hang his shingle and go, I'm going to make a go of this. And it was sort of by accident that film noir has ended up in every book. The first one, The Big Sleep, plays a central role in the book, but after that, I think it got such good feedback that I kept doing that, and most people anyway, like the references to the old movies and to Humphrey Bogart and things like that. So it seems to be popular right now, which is pretty cool.
So that's the vibe I get from the cover. And I was reading the first chapter of your first book, and yeah, it definitely's got that vibe, like that old what was it, the
film noir?
Yeah, and the Spade and Philip Marlowe. The Reed Ferguson ones, though, they're set in present time.
Yeah, present day Colorado, present day Denver.
You're spinning off, or now you're writing about Dewey Webb, so that's all taking place like back in the 50s.
Yeah, Dewey Webb appeared in the novel Backstory, and so the premise of that one is that a gentleman comes to Reed Ferguson and says, I think some of my grandfathers, there's something in his case notes, he was a detective in the 50s, and can you look into it? So it alternates chapters between present day Denver and 1955 Denver, and people really liked that character of Dewey Webb, so I decided to attempt a spin-off series. So that the first one is published, the second one is at the editor right now, and then I'll see where it goes if it starts to sell. maybe put out 6 or 8 books in the series. But it's been fun to do, to try and figure out what Denver was like. And I jumped back to 1949 to start the series, and it's been an interesting challenge, but fun.
Do you find it harder to research when it's set in the 70 years ago, or is the research kind of the same?
No, it's definitely harder, but the internet makes it somewhat easier. And then I happen to just luck into one of the fans of my Reed Ferguson series started emailing me when he read backstory, and he corrected a couple small things. And then he was mentioning he grew up in Denver in the 1950s, and we struck up a conversation that has really kind of led to a friendship between he and his wife. I peg him with questions all the time where I'll be like, hey, do you remember? And and he's a talker. He's a very nice guy, but he likes to talk and tell stories, which is wonderful. And I'll ask him a question about, what cafes did they have? And he'd be like, well, we used to eat here, and then there was this here, and whatever. And so suddenly I have this wealth of, I've got 10 restaurants now that I can reference in the story or something like that. So
that's going to be a thrill for him too. You're mentioning stuff that he's telling you about.
Yeah. Well, and then as kind of a thank you, in the first Dewey Web of Deceit, I named one of the characters after him, so he thought that
sweet. Yeah, that's fun. Okay, so now how long have you been writing?
I actually wrote a lot as a kid. It was nothing that I didn't do a lot with it. I was in kind of a creative writing class. I did have a poem win like second place in state one year or something like that. And and then college, I kind of got away from it. And then after grad school, I kept telling a friend of mine I had this idea for a story, and she just kept encouraging me to write it down. And so I wrote that. It took about 9 months. And then I just kind of always kept at it. And then I self-published Nephilim in, I think it was 2006. So before Kindle and all that. And excuse the phone.
Yeah, no problem.
I sold about 500 copies of that, I think, just on my own. Got into Kindle, 2011?
Mm-hmm.
That's when I jumped in and went, I've got these stories. I'd had a couple Reed Ferguson stories at that point, and I thought, I'm just going to jump in and see what I can do with publishing ebooks to Kindle, and kind of it's gone from there.
Wow, so you started before this whole self-publishing Kindle revolution.
Yeah.
Wow.
I honestly wish I would have, I was reading about Amanda Hawking in probably, maybe 2009, 2010, and I just didn't really kind of grasp, I think, what was the potential back then, and I wish I would have been smarter.
Yeah, I did the same thing. I started hearing about her in same time period, and well, I kind of missed that whole thing, but better late than never, right?
Yeah.
So, why did you choose to write the mysteries and thrillers? Is it have you been a fan of the genre as a reader?
Yeah. Growing up, I was a big fan of the Hardy Boys and the Alfred Hitchcock and the Three Investigators, and when I was in high school, I think I read a lot of the classics, and like Chandler and Kane and stuff, and it just was natural for me to try and write a mystery novel. And I like the idea from the writing standpoint of trying to write that mystery and putting in the clues and trying to put them in subtly and see if you can keep the reader offbeat, and they can't figure out the story till the end.
And is that the challenge when you're writing it too, to make sure that you're going to have the twists that the readers are expecting? And
yeah, definitely.
Did your favorite authors, did they influence your writing today?
I think yes. It's hard to say. I don't think I've never taken any formal writing classes or anything like that. I think a lot of it is kind of intuitive, and then talking to other authors, and I did a few critique group type of things a long time ago. One author that I talked to quite a bit was Dennis Lehane, and this was back when authors would do more signings than they do now. And we shared a few things. He shared some of his stuff on writing and things like that. So I'm sure. I think that the more you read stuff, I think it probably just on some level comes out in your writing, whether you realize it or not.
Yeah, that's a good source too. Dennis Lehane, it's one of my favorites. What are some of your favorite thriller writers or mystery writers now? Is it Dennis Lehane and any others? Yeah.
Yeah, I like Dennis Lehane. I wish he would have done more of the Patrick and I'm drawing a blank on her first name. But that De Niro character. I wish he would have done more with them, and I think he's kind of done with them. I like Michael Connelly. A lot of authors. I like their earlier stuff. I think they can tend to get a little stale as they, continue a character. I like Robert Craze. I liked some early Lee Child, but I think his is kind of getting a little stale. So read a lot of different mystery authors. I mean, I read Sue Grafton, but I think she got stale a long time ago. But I want to find out how she ends it with Kinsey.
Yeah, it keeps going.
Yeah.
And so, where do you get the ideas for your books?
Kind of all over. I mean, I will. I'll see something in the news or just read a snippet of something and think, wow, I can turn that into some kind of a story. Or certainly with the Reed Ferguson series, because he references film noir, I'll actually go back sometimes and look at the plots of some of the movies and go, oh, I could do something with this, and then this is how I can reference the movie within it or something. Or like one of them is The Postman Always Brings Dice, so it's on The Postman Always Rings Twice.
Yeah.
So of course then it had to have a gambling theme. So
yeah.
So it kind of all over,
And how many books do you have in that series?
I just released the 13th, and then there's a Kindle Worlds novella and short story.
Oh, wow. And the Kindle Worlds, what world are you writing in there?
The Sidney Rye Vigilante series. So I pulled Sidney Rye, and she comes to Colorado. Her character comes to Colorado and is involved in an investigation with Reed Ferguson.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I've looked at that Kindle Worlds, but I haven't taken a stab at it yet. How did you find that? Was that different to write versus writing in your world?
I know Emily Kimmelman, the author of that series, so she invited me to be a part of it, of the initial launch. And it was an interesting experiment. I'm not sure I would do it again, because I was hoping that there would be more kind of crossover of her fans wanting to read my books, and I think there was a little bit of that, but not as much as I hoped for. Mm-hmm. But it was, from a writing standpoint, it was fun to try to take her character, because her character, Sidney Rye, is a vigilante. She's a real rough around the edges woman, and in my opinion, anger issues, And then Reed Ferguson is really just kind of this nice guy that's trying to do right. And so it was an interesting challenge to take kind of these two almost moral opposites and go, how can they solve a crime that both of them can feel like they did what they could with it. So it was interesting.
And in the process, is that at the end, does it have to get approved by the creator of that world?
It doesn't have to. In her case, I think she wanted to read some of the stories and offer some suggestions. And so, her main suggestion to me was there's a dog, Blue, that's in her stories, and she said, you need to bring him into the story more. But no, when you anybody could go in and write in one of those worlds if they wanted to, and the author doesn't necessarily have any say over that.
Oh, wow, interesting. Oh, yeah, because you had a personal relationship with her before. Okay, I didn't realize that it was that free, kind of a free for all.
Yeah, it's kind of Amazon's own version of fan fiction. So,
okay.
And the initial thing that why people didn't want to get into it was because you could lose copyright over your own characters. So of course authors are like, "Oh, I'm not going to do that."
Mm-hmm.
And now I don't. I retain the rights to Reed Ferguson and it was his then girlfriend, now wife Willie, and all the other characters. If I created anything new, it remains Amazon's copyright. But I didn't end up doing anything new that I cared about. So
that's interesting. And how many are you working on another Reed Ferguson book right now, or on Dewey?
I'm in the beginning stages of trying to figure out the next Reed story, because I just yesterday turned a Dewey Webb novel over to the editor, so I'm kind of in that what am I going to do next phase. And what I'd like to do, if I can think of the story, is I'd like to write a couple of short stories that then I could release between novels. So here over the next week or so, I might try and see if I can crank out a couple of short stories and then start the next novel. And I think I sort of have the idea for the next novel, just the very beginning kernels of it. So.
And do you usually write, like if you're writing one novel, do you focus on that, or you like write a couple different series at the same time?
No, I'm pretty much a one novel at a time. I read a Louis L'Amour's autobiography, and he could write 2 or 3 things all at once, and I haven't been able to match that.
Yeah, isn't it amazing? And that's like on a typewriter.
Yes, no doubt.
Oh wow! And so I saw noticed in your biography you also written in other genres like horror and young adult. What are the differences between those writing in different genres? Is it a big difference that you feel?
Yeah, Nephilim was kind of funny because I had written 2 Reed Ferguson books, and I was at that time, this was like 2002, 2003, and I was like, well, I'm going to try and get an agent and whatever. And then I started rereading Salem's Lot, and I had a dream that ended up being kind of the kernel of the story for Nephilim, and I stopped and wrote that, and it took a year or so to write and then edit it and polish it up. And yeah, it was different because I was trying to sort of capture the feel of like early Stephen King or some of the older horror, where it wasn't so much the gore or that kind of thing, but it was that psychological fright or type of thing. And so for me, it definitely felt like a different type of writing. The YA series, the Noah Winter series, it's different as well because it's geared to kids, so the writing style's a little bit different. You have to be somewhat careful of your vocabulary and how you're structuring sentences and that kind of thing. And then there's shorter novels too.
And now when you're writing your novels, do you like are any experiences from your real life, do they make it onto your books?
Yeah, here and there. I mean, I've even had people tell me that they can hear me and read, the humor and stuff. And then like Nephilim, that the premise of that is, what if the Nephilim, who are half man, half fallen angels, come back to Earth and try to take over a small Colorado mountain tourist town? And the setting for that is sort of based on my parents' cabin outside of Boulder, Colorado. So that factored into that novel. So yeah, things come in, whether it's personality things or sometimes settings or stuff like that.
And how about friends and family? Do they ever make it into your books, like a character or anything like that? Do they recognize?
No, no. The only thing I ever did was my cousin kept saying, well, she wanted a character named after her. She wanted a character named after her. And so I finally had this character that was sort of this druggy kind of woman, party. And I named her after my cousin.
Says, there you go. You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks a lot. But no, because I do worry that, you do worry a little bit that you don't want to offend anybody. Although Reed's mother has aspects of my mother in her, and my mother would be horrified if she ever heard that.
Yeah. And so, what are some of the, when you're writing your novels? What are some of the challenges that you encounter? I mean, is it like, what do you find most challenging, like the actual writing, or doing the research, or getting ready to get in the right mindset?
Sometimes it depends on the day.
Yeah.
Because I'm definitely a pantser. I do not plot from start to finish, and although there are times I wish I could, I just can't. I can't envision the whole story. I kind of, and to me, I think you can lose surprises if you're trying to just go off an outline. I might have some general flow of the story, and sometimes I sort of know how I want it to end, but I don't know chapter to chapter. And so sometimes in the middle of a story, I can kind of get stuck where I'm like, okay, I need it to go here, but I'm not sure how to do it, or something like that. And I have a friend that I'll talk to, and we work through things, or sometimes it's just taking a walk or something like that, and I just start thinking it through, and this could happen, well, no, this you can't because of this, or whatever. So it really just kind of depends, because there's some days that the words just seem to flow, and there's other days where it seems like I'm struggling to get a chapter out.
And do you write every day?
I try to. When I'm starting a novel, I try to do a chapter every day, and I don't always make that. So generally, my books generally seem to be about 30 chapters, and so my goal is always to do it in a month, but I never do quite that. It's probably more like 5 weeks or sometimes 6. But yeah, I try to write something every day when I'm working on a novel.
And do you use any writing software, or use good old Word? Or?
Yeah, no, I was talking to somebody about that yesterday, because he was like, you need to use Scrivener. I don't. I use Word. I probably should get into Scrivener. I had a copy at one point. I don't know that I still do, because, like he was saying, even just the basic stuff is pretty easy to pick up. But no, I've just generally, I've done Words for so long. Mm-hmm. It just seems weird to switch to something else.
Yeah, it's working for you, 13 novels, or more than 13 because you are the other ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, I seem to be doing all right with Word.
Right.
So where do you usually write? Location-wise?
Yeah. Well, right now it's kind of anywhere. I'm actually sort of in transit, where I sold my house and I bought land, and I'm living in somebody's basement now, so I don't really have my own space. I used to kind of need my office stuff around me. I had some books, and I collect sports memorabilia, and I kind of had my space that I needed to be in, but I've gotten now where I can write just about anywhere, whether it's at the laptop or sitting in a car waiting for somebody or something like that, and I'll jot down words. And so.
Yeah, oh yeah, that's the nice thing about this about it too, right? You can really do it from anywhere as long as you got your laptop.
Yeah, exactly.
And what keeps you going, writing your stories and putting the work in?
Some of it is the dream to write for a living, which I'm not there yet. I still have a job, but the more I do it, I don't think I could stop, because there's just that piece of wanting to see where the characters go, and just even though sometimes it is work to produce a novel, when you finish it, it's a really cool feeling to go, wow, there's another one under my belt, and let's see what people think of this story, and did it accomplish what I wanted it to? And there's a lot of other stories in my head that I still want to tell. So all of that kind of keeps me motivated to keep going.
And do you still find time to read?
Not as much.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I wish. I had a job that I had to use public transportation, and I would read to and from work, but I haven't done that in a year, and so I don't get nearly as much reading time in. It's one of the things I miss, but with having a full-time job and then trying to do so much at night, there just isn't as much time to read as I wish there was.
And do you interact a lot with your readers? Are you like on Facebook and all that good stuff?
Yeah, and I also have a mailing list, and then I have a beta group or a launch team that helps with they'll read the book ahead of time and spot typos and stuff, and then they review it once it goes live. And there's a private Facebook group for those people, and I'll interact some with those guys there as well and chat, and so it's nice. I definitely try to get emails out maybe a couple times a month and just kind of be personable with people and let them know what's going on, and just try to build a fan base where people care about you. And then I think if they care about you, they're going to care about your writing and your stories as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, especially nowadays, it's just people expect a lot more. It's not as big of a deal anymore to be able to reach out to a writer, as before it was like such arm's length. Now that's gone now.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and I did notice for the listeners that on your website you're giving for joining your mailing list, they could get some freebies, some good stuff, huh? A couple books and a story. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I just it's called they call it a reader magnet. Yeah, it's basically if you in exchange for your email, I'm going to give you a couple of stories. And a short story, and it's all free, and you can remain on the mailing list if you want. You can unsubscribe at any time, but I think it's a way that what you would hope is that if people are at least somewhat interested in what you're writing, then this gives them a chance to a trial run. They can try you out without investing anything, and then hopefully if they like what they read, they'll go on and buy some of your other stuff.
Yeah, that's cool. And if for the listeners, I'll have a link on the website. But it's ReneePawlish.com. If you go there, you'll be able to see her offer for that.
Yeah, and I do other things too. I don't want, I think it's important to not just be the buy my books. And I run contests for things, for books, I've done Kindles before. I'm looking at doing some tchotchkes, like mugs or keychains or, that type of thing. And I try to give the people on the list, previews of upcoming things. And I've given away one October. I gave away one of my short stories, so that type of thing. Because I don't want it, I want people to feel like, hey, this is it's a fun experience for them to be a part of the list.
Oh, that's great! Yeah, and you also you also run you're running a promotion where you've gotten together a whole bunch of different thriller writers, mystery writers, right?
Right.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about that? I think that's coming up in June, right?
Right. Yeah, that's ReneePawlish.com/promo, and what I'm doing is just gathering a bunch of mystery and thriller authors, and we just are promoting. I think it's going to alternate between free and 99-cent books or 99-cent box sets or something. And, this is all, I'm not charging anybody to be on the list, nobody on the list. We're not asking for emails or anything. It literally is just come to the page, scroll through the covers, and if something strikes your fancy, click on the cover. It'll take you to Amazon and you can check out the book. And
oh, wow, I didn't realize it was that direct. That's awesome.
Yeah, so, it's a way for all of us to share with people that we know in our mailing lists and social media and whatnot, and just hopefully, as readers, they might discover somebody that they wouldn't have heard of otherwise. And then, like I said, there's because I know people do get tired of, I don't want to give you my email or something, so, nothing to do with that. It's just, if you like a book, give the author a try.
Yeah, that's great too. That's what I like about the writing community too. Is like authors like yourself helping out other authors. Putting this together, organizing it, just kind of helping each other out. Even though theoretically you could be all competitors, but instead of being all cutthroat, everyone's helping each other out, which I think is so cool.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, even, like you and I interacting, and then it's like, hey, why don't you have me on, I'd like to interview that type of thing. And I there is a really good community of authors out there that are sharing what they are learning and encouraging. And it's really cool to see, because there's plenty of readers out there, and there's no need to be in competition with each other. And
yeah, it's like sharing. It's like if you read if there's an author you like or a book you like, you want to share it and tell everybody. So it's a great way of doing that.
Right. Yeah.
All right. So, is there anything else that you'd like to tell to our listeners before I let you go?
You know what? It's been a whole lot of fun, and I would, if people want more information, check out my website, or on Amazon, and you can try a couple books for free and see if you like them or not. And I run deals here and there, and Reed Ferguson. It's funny because I think I sort of have created a new genre of like comedic noir.
I was going to ask you about that, because you actually use comedy in there. It's a mystery, but there's a comedic bent to it, because I read the first chapter. Yeah. How is that just because is that coming from your own personality, or how did that go?
Yeah, no, I can be a smart ass. Like I said, there's definitely me and Reed, and and the thing is a couple people are like, well, it was a parody of noir, and it really isn't that. Although in some, I can see how people would take it that way, but it really is just they have some of the stories are darker than others. Or have a darker theme around it. But yeah, there's definitely elements of humor mixed in, and as the series have gone along, it's very light romance between Reed and his girlfriend, who then becomes his wife, and but yeah, the comedy is definitely there as well.
Do you find comedy or your humor go into your other books as well, in the other genres?
No, I really haven't. Like, the Dewey Webb was very intentional to be kind of a hard-boiled noir kind of book. And so, a few people have criticized the Reed Ferguson because he doesn't shoot people, or, they're like, well, he doesn't always have his gun. But that was very intentional, because he even references in some of the books where he says he would like to be like James Garner from the Rockford Files, and James Garner was like, I don't carry a gun because I don't want to have to use it. Mm-hmm. That's kind of Reed, where he really doesn't want to have to shoot anybody. But then, like the Dewey Webb, he's very different. He's not afraid to slap people around or whatever to get what he needs, and that was very intentional to make him not a 1950s Reed. I wanted him to be his own character and his own personality. And the Noah Winter books, they have probably a little bit of humor, but they're very fast-paced action adventure. Boys especially love them because it's all about scuba diving and searching for treasure and things like that, and they really like that. So yeah, probably Reed Ferguson is the only one that's truly intentionally meant to be funny.
Well, it's like you've hit something there, because when I was doing a little research before getting on doing this interview, I mean, your reviews for all those books are incredible. Very very good, high reviews on Amazon. So you're struck a chord, that's for sure. Yeah, it's been a little bit difficult to market, just because people see the covers and they think noir, and it's not necessarily noir. And they're very clean books too. I intentionally don't have swearing or sex. It's just alluded to, and a lot of people appreciate that. I think there's a lot of readers that get tired of all the sex and swearing in books these days.
and so it's definitely, there's an audience there for that as well. And yeah, they can be a little difficult to market.
Well, it's like you said, there's a lot of readers out there with a lot of different tastes, so it's an exciting time to be doing this, huh?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, well, we'll take any more of your time. I want to thank you very much for coming on the show and letting us know about your books and your story. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Meet the Thriller Author. You can learn more about this podcast and about future interviews over at the website at www.thrillingreads.com/podcast. And if you haven't done so yet, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to this podcast on iTunes. You can do it on Stitcher, or you can do it by email over at the website. I'd also like to invite you to join the mailing lists so you never miss an episode. And I'd also like to invite you to visit my author page at Facebook, Alan Peterson Books, and also my website, alanpeterson.com.